Good morning, this is Jessica from CorpU, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Smarter Growth webinar, How to Drive Transformation Through Experiential Learning, with our partners from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so should you have any issues during the webinar, please type a question into the question box and I will assist you. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared via email and on our website, so be on the lookout. Okay, that's it. Without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to CorpU's founder and CEO, Alan Todd. Alan?
All right, thank you, Jessica. Welcome everybody to our Smarter Growth series. I'm excited today to hear from Melanie Weaver Barnett from Michigan Ross School. Experiential learning is a really cool topic, and I thought I would just frame it this way. So everything we pay attention to and everything that we talk about is ultimately about helping to become a learning organization. And that's an organization where people learn how to win together. And you win in the marketplace by out-learning your competitors. And so if you think about the innovation curve, the change curve, really organizations that are successful in the future are those organizations that learn how to crank up their rate of learning. And the rate of learning is really the constraint to success, constraint to growth. I read in PwC's 22nd annual Global CEO Survey, one of their top 3 issues. They've been doing this survey 22 years in a row. This was the 2018 version, but was bridging capability gaps. And it was essentially unpacking the story of organizational learning. And there are a couple of constraints that have to do with behavior change, the environment, the culture. So people can get pockets of learning. They can get some people that are learn-it-alls or lifetime learners, but it's very difficult to harness the collective genius, no one left behind. And to do that, it requires creating an environment that is positive and safe. And so my favorite quotes, and I love these things are rooted in forever, but first Kurt Lewin, behavior. If we're shaping behavior, if we're learning professionals or building learning organizations, we are in the behavior change business. And rule number 1 of behavior change is behavior is a function of the person and the environment. So if we take the person out of the environment, develop them, train them, and put them back into, let's say, a toxic environment, they will ultimately shrink back from whence they came. So the whole idea of the function, the person, the environment has to change. And with Melanie's colleagues at University of Michigan at the Center for Positive Organizations at Michigan Ross, I just love this. This is about what happens when you do create a positive environment. An abundance culture with positive leadership practices is significantly positively correlated or related to profitability, productivity, quality, innovation, customer sat, employee retention. And those are just the employer metrics. When you look at the employee metrics, it's even better. If you create a positive environment and people develop a habit or a mindset of positivity, they develop a positive mindset, it turns out that they live longer, they make up to 30% more money, they have better relationships at work, better relationships at home. So the whole person becomes better. And so there's a lot of huge benefits for the employees and the employer. And then, of course, finally, Maslow said it back in 1943, is that you engage in learning the extent to which you're not crippled by fear and that you feel safe enough to dare. So everything that we're going to unpack today that Melanie's going to talk about with experiential learning, some wonderful case examples about how to do that, it all sits on this learning organization foundation where you have a positive, safe environment. And finally, just to tee it up, for those of you that know us, CorpU, we partner with great schools like the Michigan Ross School of Business to build programs that our customers use, typically Fortune 500 type companies, to develop their emerging leaders, frontline leaders, business leaders, senior leaders in ways that drive transformation. You're going to hear really good transformation stories today, and helping people build those general management skills, helping positive leaders. So we do thousands of positive leader programs, developing thousands of people per year in that one example. So that's what we do. And today's presenter, I'm really excited that we have Melanie Weaver Barnett with us today. Michigan Ross Exec Ed, just for Melanie won't say this, but I will. They're ranked in, if you look at just executive education, they're in the top 8 in the world, the top 3 in the U.S. The only 2 peers they have in the United States rankings are Harvard and Stanford. In that, so as you think about, as Melanie tells a story about experiential learning, we know that she's coming from the deepest credibility in the world, the highest ranking, and these rankings are based on your program design, your teaching methods, your faculty, your follow-up. So a lot of this experiential learning, these are the things that go into those rankings. So you're getting, in some sense, a little bit of the secret sauce. How do they do it? How do you achieve that? So if you're a chief learning officer and you're trying to drive a learning organization, these are some of the lessons you're going to hear today. And finally, Melanie was, just to give you a little personal side, an all-American distance runner at the University of Michigan. She did her undergraduate work there. She did her graduate work there. And she was given the university's prestigious Gerald Ford Award as a former athlete that went on to do great things in the world. So I'm super excited to have you with us today. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us. Before I turn it over to you, if we can just pop up a quick poll. So for the folks in the audience, need you to answer a quick question. What is your level of knowledge with experiential learning? Let's give you 30 seconds, 40 seconds here. Everybody get voting. We'll get a little bit of data and see where we are with our folks. Keep going. Keep going, keep voting. Great, we just passed the 50% mark. We need a couple more. 60%, keep going. All right, we're going to go 5 more seconds. Get your fingers voting. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you. Melanie, tell us, and let's look at this poll, Melanie. We'll start by saying thanks for joining us. We're excited about today, and let's see what you see here on the screen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Todd, for the nice introduction. And yeah, the poll is interesting, kind of what we expected. I think people in this audience tend to have a fair amount of experience, at least a little bit of experience with experiential learning, and that's good. We can all sort of add to the collective understanding of it. And by the way, anyone who wants to continue the conversation and get more into an interactive conversation after this, we as a partnership here, CorpU and Michigan Ross, are really happy to continue in that conversation, and we learn from you in all of that communication as well. So offer that up to you also.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's take that off and off we go.
All right. So I wanted to start by just saying a few words about why this topic and why this topic from or with Michigan Ross. So here at this school, we really did a lot of introspection about, like a lot of you in your organizations, about who we are and why we exist and what we want to, what difference we want to make in the world. And when it comes right down to it, we firmly believe in and are committed to the positive difference that organizations writ large, government, business, NGOs, all kinds of organizations around the world, the impact that they have on the communities and on the people and on the world at large. Business has this incredible impact, and we want that impact, of course, to be as positive as possible. And a significant, probably the majority of that impact is driven by what? Well, it's driven by the leaders in those organizations. And so we believe and are committed to developing leaders with the right kinds of mindsets and skills and capabilities to drive positive impacts through their organizations on the world. So we care a lot about how to develop those kinds of leaders. And as it turns out, there's research, plenty of research that shows, and our own experience shows that experiential learning can be a very key factor in the development of leaders with these kinds of capabilities. So that's why we care. And, you know, this experiential learning works not only to impact the readiness of people for next levels in their organizations, but it also can impact almost any strategic initiative that an organization is involved in, whether it's around innovation or process improvement, customer centricity, the bottom line, et cetera. So I want to talk a little bit today about why experiential learning works. We'll delve into a little bit of research on it, and then we'll also think about it from our own perspectives, and also go into some stories, some examples of organizations we've worked with, what we've done with them, and the outcomes that they've achieved. So that's the plan for today. So I'm going to ask you quickly to do another poll and to think about the year 1990 and what you were doing in 1990. So we're going to give you 3 choices, and if you'll quickly respond to this poll, that will be helpful.
All right, folks, 38% in, over 50, keep going. Nice progress. Let's give it 10 more seconds. Let's go. We got to get over 80%. Everybody get your fingers going. Keep going, keep going. We beat 80%. Let's go. 5 seconds. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, fired up.
All right, so there's nobody here that wasn't born yet in that year, and some of you were already in the workplace, and a large majority of you, a significant number, were still in school. So while you were likely early in your career or still in school, in that year, 1990, here at Ross, the staff and faculty were conceiving or conceptualizing this idea of having an entire course load and an entire semester for an entire term for our MBA students be in-company action learning projects in teams. Now, at that time, that was a radical idea, pretty commonplace now. Lots of schools have done something similar, but at that time it was radical. It wasn't very well accepted in the beginning. What people said, oh, it's too expensive, it's not sustainable, it's not what we do. But a core group of committed people here decided to do an experiment. And we had one section of our MBA program do that. So for an entire semester, their entire course load was a project that they did for a company. And we had multiple companies involved, and we had a specific process for the companies to submit the business challenges that they wanted the students to work on. So that pilot with that one section was so successful that by the following year, it became a requirement for all of our students. And the thing is, it had great benefits for the students. They regularly described it as the single most important piece of learning that they had in their time here as a student. The faculty learned a lot and got a lot of real practical experience that enhances their teaching in classrooms, and the companies reported great results as well. So fast forward now, to today, and here at Ross, we've done well over 2,000 of these projects with, almost 1,400 companies in 92 different countries. We've continuously improved this process, and we have a group of faculty and staff members who really know how to do this well. I think probably many of you have done some experiential learning, action learning in your work, and you know that it can be very productive, get great results. It also is really hard to do it well. And so this is just, a little bit of info for you, a little bit of data to help you see the level of experience that we have here at Ross. And we've continued to hone this process and to make it better and better. And just last year, we launched what we call MAP, Multidisciplinary Action Project 4.0, and it's called REAL. It's a series of different kinds of experiential learning we're putting our students in, and I'll share something about that at the end of the presentation today. So I always like to start with a dose of current reality. I think that's a good place to start. And just there's a lot of research out there about learning and development in organizations and, the impact that it's having or not. So when you survey leading senior executives in leading companies, they say that one of the key deliverables they're looking for is tying learning to business outcomes. And they say, if in fact this was clearer, that the learning that I'm investing in is creating positive business outcomes, the learning and development people would have a seat at the table more readily, more often. The second thing that these CEOs and other C-level executives say is that helping the company overcome business challenges is their second most desirable outcome from learning and development. And I think it's interesting to see what are the top capabilities or topic areas that they believe are important. And the top 4 of those are leadership, communication, collaboration, and I do have a 4th. It's a typo on the slide, but I'll tell you what it is. The 4th one was role-specific skills. And as you think about experiential learning, you realize that these 4 things can very readily be crafted into experiential learning activities. The spend on learning and development is pretty significant, $365 billion reportedly in 2018. And yet, 77% of organizations report that they're experiencing a significant leadership gap that causes them problems, that makes them not as prepared as they should be for the future. And only 10% of CEOs believe that their company's leadership initiatives have a clear business impact, one that they're comfortable with. So I'll just sum this slide up by saying 2 things. Organizational learning seems critical to an organization's success. It's recognized, but we collectively are not doing it nearly well enough yet. And that's where I think a better understanding of experiential learning, one of the most effective ways to learn, can be helpful to all of us. So I'll ask you just to take a moment and think about something that you do well. Whether it's getting up in front of a group and giving a talk, whether it's leading a training program, whether it's coaching, it might be coding, it might be skiing, but think of something you do well. The proverbial one we sometimes hear about is riding a bike, but think about something that you do well. And if you take a moment to think about, well, what is it that led me to be able to do this so well? I'm really an expert at this. You may have a number of different things that you did. You might have observed others doing it. You might have done some reading. You might have watched some YouTube videos. You might have taken a course. And if you think about which one of all the activities that I've done that have led me to be good at this had the most impact, if you're like our other groups that we work with in this realm, you will be likely to say that actually doing it and then reflecting on how I did and making some adjustments and doing it again and going through that cycle is what made the most difference. So I think most of us quite readily conclude that this learning by doing thing works. But I think as learning and development practitioners, as HR leaders, as managers and leaders in other parts of the organization, it's really incumbent upon us to understand why it works. So I do want to spend just a couple of minutes here, a few minutes, talking about some of the research that helps explain why experiential learning works as well as it does. And I'm going to talk about 3 different bits of research here. So we're going to talk about why it works. Go on to the next slide, Alan. So one of the most prolific researchers in this area was David Kolb, and he sort of set a foundation for how people learn with research he did in the 80s, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, just want to quickly remind ourselves of it, and anyone who isn't familiar with it may want to look into it a little bit more. But essentially, Kolb did experiments to learn about the cognitive process, like what is really happening that is enabling people to learn and change their behavior and improve. And he found that, essentially we first have to go through an experience, and then if and when people take time to reflect on that experience and think about what went well and what didn't. How does this compare to other experiences I've had? How does this integrate into what other things I'm doing? What might I learn from this? How might I do it better next time? And then to actively experiment, again, trying out what you've learned, and then having this another concrete experience. You go through what is called, referred to as cold learning cycle. And so the thing is that sometimes you go through this subconsciously, right? If you think about how you learn to ride a bike, for example, I know when I think about that, I remember I was on this blue bike and my dad was out there with me, had taken the training wheels off. I was nervous, and he sent me down the sidewalk. Well, these slabs of sidewalk, there was one slab that had raised up, and it created a rise between the two slabs of about 3 inches or so. And of course, the first time I hit that, I fell down. And I didn't consciously sit down and say, I'm going to reflect on that, and what did I learn from that experience? But I realized as I look back on it now, I did do some reflection on that, and I realized, what might have led to that and what might make a difference. I subconsciously realized that I needed to be a little looser, a little more flexible. I needed to be up a little more. So the next time I rode my bike over that rise, I stood up off the seat a little bit. I flexed my knees. I was more relaxed. I still fell, but the third time I did it right. So sometimes this does happen subconsciously, but in our world today, where we're busy, going on to the next thing, where what we're trying to learn and deal with is more complex than ever and changing rapidly, it's really important to build this type of reflections and learning cycle into the experiential learning activities that we create. Another body of research that I think is important to keep in mind is one that was done by Ichak Ozgen around planned behavior. So you really want people to eventually plan to make a behavior change, right? And what Ozgen and his colleagues found is that in order to make a behavior change, you have to first have the intention to make that change. That's sort of common sense, but they proved it by research. And what they found is that there were 3 critical components of people forming that intention to change. One of those is the attitude or the belief that you can do this. So you need to know that, feel that you have the competency to do it. This can happen. I have the right attitude around this change. The second area he refers to as a subjective norm, but this is essentially a motivation to do it. A knowledge that other people are doing it and other people care about it, and there's an incentive to do it or a motivation to do it. And then the third area that Ozgen found was critical was that the person perceives that they have the control and influence over the entire set of activities or process that's necessary to make the change happen. So it's another kind of body of work that we can think about as we design experiential learning activities, because they can very readily be designed to get at all 3 of those aspects of behavior change, planned behavior change. The third piece of research I want to quickly mention is some that was done right here at the Ross School of Business by our faculty members, our now Dean, Scott Giroux, and Management and Organizations faculty member and Department Chair Susan Ashford. And so they did a lot of research on how leaders develop and how they learn, especially in complex, changing environments. And one of the outcomes of their research, some of the findings were that they learn a lot from experiences, right? And the kinds of experiences that they learn the most from are ones that get them out of their comfort zone, that address the entire person, their spiritual, their emotional, their cognitive, their physical aspects of what they do. When the learning is connected to their real work, their real life, when it somehow enhances their intrinsic motivation, it gets them excited somehow without some external motivating factor. When there are real stakes, it matters more, and they learn more effectively, more quickly. Even in classrooms, and you may have seen this yourself, when you have some kind of activity that people are doing and you add in a prize or you add in money as the outcome, somehow people get more engaged than they were when it was just an activity. And importantly, they determined that if people engage in a process called mindful engagement, which they discerned and created a model for from this research, they much more effectively and quickly learn and change their behavior. So you can see in this model on the slide connections to Cole's learning cycle as well, but it essentially, the mindful engagement process says that when you're entering something to learn, you need to have a learning mindset. So I'm on that approach circle right now. So you're approaching this learning experience that you're going to have, and it's really important to go into it not just focused on the business performance or the outcomes I'm looking for, but to enter it with a learning mindset. And if you are someone who designs learning experiences for others, to make sure that you are helping the people involved get into that learning mindset and know that that is an important part of why we're doing this, not just to have the impact on the organization. And the second piece of the approach phase of this cycle is to set learning goals. We know from research and our own experience that setting goals improves the chances that you're actually going to make significant improvement. Even if you don't meet the goal, you make more improvement when you've set a goal. So as you approach a learning activity, yourself and for others, stimulate a learning mindset and set learning goals. Then you move into the action phase, and the three critical components here are to have active experimentation. Some of the things that are referred to in the bullet points over there: stretch activities, experiments, you can coach people, etc. So have active experimentation. Incorporate feedback into that phase so that people know that they should seek feedback and so that they are given feedback. And another important component of this part of the process is what Giroux and Ashford refer to as emotion regulation. So you want to be careful to structure activities and to coach people and guide people so that they have some tension, some creative tension, but it doesn't boil over into anxiety. So they get competitive, but it doesn't boil over into destructive behaviors. So emotion regulation, feedback seeking, and active experimentation are the three critical components in the action phase. And then the reflection phase is, as we know, time to sit back and think about, what did I do? How did it go? What did I learn? How does this connect? And the important thing for us is to build this in as a process and as a discipline that we do in our experiential learning. And I also will advocate that we build it into our day-to-day work, that we embed this kind of mindful engagement process into our day-to-day work. So we make ourselves take time to sit back and think about, what did I learn in this meeting? What did I learn today? What did I learn from this conversation? And what does it mean going forward? One other body of research you might be interested in, if you're not familiar with it already, is from Morgan McCall. And a lot of his research was done in the 80s, still very relevant today. And he found that there are 5 categories of critical development experiences. When they surveyed about 200 executives and they took qualitative data on what led to your being able to be this effective leader. And there were 5 categories. And as I read these, I think you will see that you can create experiential learning activities and opportunities for people that incorporate all 5 of these. So one was challenging assignments. The second one was other people. They learned a lot from other people, both good and bad. They learned from hardship that they had experienced. They learned from coursework, and they learned from personal life experiences. So when it comes to our experiential learning activities, we can build all of that in. So I want to finish this section of the talk today kind of back where we started, right? We started out talking about how we kind of know that that learning by doing works, this experiential learning. We've all learned how to ride bikes, learned how to do things that we know we learned from experience. This idea has been around for a long time, and you could move to the next slide, Alan. So this is apparently a configuration of Confucius, and we've all heard this saying before: I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And reportedly, Confucius said this many, many, many years ago. So it's an idea that's been around for a long time. I want to now move into some examples to share with you of experiential learning activities that we've designed and how they've worked for individuals and for their organizations. So there are 3 relatively quick ones I'd like to mention, and then I have 2 additional ones that are more significant and are more around the idea of using experiential learning as a catalyst for culture change. The first 3 I'm going to share with you here are specific slices of experiential learning activities and a specific type of learning and impact that they had. So the first one is with one of the largest automotive companies in the world. They've requested that we not share their name as we talk with other people about the work, but they're comfortable with our sharing the experience. So one of the things we do with this organization is we do a program for them, if you will, a learning experience here at our Executive Learning Center on positive leadership and human-centered design. And so on the human-centered design part, they go through a simulation where they're having an experiential learning in a simulated environment. And then they go through the same process with their own business challenge that they're facing. And as they do that, one gentleman's job, he's an asset manager, and he was responsible for asset tracking. So tracking these really expensive tools on the plant floor. And at the time he entered this experience, that was done electronically but manually, right? And so he used this design process. He did the things that we do when we do design thinking. He sampled extreme users. He got information directly from customers about their pain points and their aspirations. He did a prototype. He experimented. He reflected and came up with an improved version, and eventually implemented these RFID tags, low-frequency RFID tags that trigger a flashing light, and that enabled people to not only know where the tools were, but how to find them quickly and get them to where they needed to be. So if you fast forward about a year from that time, this company is now using the same technology, the same methodology to track all kinds of assets in the organization, from these tools to their art collection to the automobiles themselves. And that mindful engagement process that I mentioned was built into that experience. A second one I'll mention is with Oracle Corporation, and we work with senior executives there who come through a learning experience. And one of the activities we do with them is one many of you may be familiar with, one of those where you cook a meal together, right? And then there's some learning and insights that you glean around efficiency, around communication, around teams and relationships, etc. So over time, the groups evolved into an idea of considering sustainability and the waste of food as they created all this food. It was always more than they could eat. And they formed the idea of, rather than wasting the food, we'll take it to Mott Children's Hospital. That's the hospital here at the University of Michigan, and give it to the parents who are invariably sitting around for hours and hours waiting for their children to get out of surgery, to wake up, to get test results, etc. And that turned into a very positive experience that then led to one group deciding to come up with a financial contribution to Mott Children's Hospital. Word of this kind of quickly made its way back to someone at headquarters, and the company decided they would match whatever funds the group came up with. In the matter of a couple hours, they had decided they had come up with $10,000 to donate to Mott Children's Hospital. So all of that was really cool and fun and gratifying, and they all left on a high, of course. But I said to Joe Tilson, that global head of learning and development for Oracle, later, I said, but does it really make any difference going forward? Like, is there really any sustainable impact from these kinds of activities? And her response was, are you kidding me? These people are on fire. That was the phrase she used. These people are on fire, not only for themselves and for each other, but for the company. And because there are so many people now who have gone through this type of learning experience, they are all connected, and this fire, if you will, has spread throughout large swaths of the company. The final quick example here is one with a healthcare delivery organization. Some of the skills we've been talking about are what sometimes are referred to as softer skills around leadership and communication. This one is an example of a harder skill. We worked with a group on the physics of process flows, and they learned formulas and a process for analyzing a work process and improving it. And they took this model back to the organization, one group of 3 people, into this healthcare organization called Spectrum Health in West Michigan. And they applied it to their bed turnover process. And they came up with a new methodology for doing bed turnover that saved the organization $3 million a year. Luckily for us, there was someone measuring the ROI of the program we were doing, and that helped a lot with making it significantly positive one. So those are 3 examples of, kind of slices of experiential learning and how it can work. I'd like to also share with you a couple examples of using experiential learning for culture change. So one of these is with DTE Energy, which is a public utility here in Michigan, although they operate in 22 states. They have over 10,000 employees, so it's a pretty large organization. And in 2011 through 2013, they were working on their operating model and creating a vision and mission, aspiration, and that kind of stuff. They even worked with a company on culture change, and they said it was good stuff, but it never really took off. But around 2016, they got really clear about the kind of culture change they wanted to create, and they built it around this concept that Alan mentioned in the beginning that was formulated here at Ross through our Center for Positive Organizations. And they wanted to create a positive culture and a positive organization based on the principles of that around communication, relationships, culture, climate, etc. And so we started with their senior most executives and worked with them to help them clarify exactly what they were trying to achieve in the company and how they, as individuals, how their own personal purpose connected to that. And as we did that, I think there were lots of insights that came out, but one of the key ones for this company and its executives was if they really wanted to achieve their goals around employee engagement and the energy in the organization, they needed everybody to realize how their personal purpose connected with the organization's purpose. So there were many, many activities that this organization did to create an engaging culture and to move up on their engagement scores. In this industry, public utilities, right, you know where you stand relative to your competitors, or they're not really competitors, but relative to the others in the country who do this same kind of work. So they know we're in the bottom decile or we're in the top quartile. They know where they rank compared to everyone else in the same kind of business. So this organization, DTE Energy, really wanted to move up on engagement, employee engagement. So they did a number of things. These executives who spent some time with us figuring out the legacy that they wanted to leave, they each got up and publicly spoke about that and how their own personal aspirations in life were being in large part fulfilled by the work they do for the company. They made themselves really vulnerable in doing this, and some of them, For some of them, I think it was unexpected for people, and it really had a positive impact. They did this training program for directors and managers and frontline leaders and union people around this positive organization and positive leadership concept and the principles associated with that. And of course, there was a lot of experiential learning built into that. They did several other things. They introduced a gratitude wall, which was actually an idea they took from us as well, where you have pockets on the wall with people's names on them, and when you're grateful for something someone did, you can write a note and put it in there. There's also a place to write what you're grateful for in just in general as well. They redesigned their public spaces to be energizing and collaborative. They launched even a film festival where they gave some training in how to create a film, and they provided equipment for teams that wanted to do it. And these teams would create a video about how their purpose as individuals and as a team intersected with the company's purpose, which, by the way, had a lot wrapped up in it, but essentially it was to be a force for growth in the communities we live and serve. So to be a force for growth in the communities in which we live and serve. And one of those communities is, one of their most important ones is Detroit. So the film festival took off and has become a really fun tradition that energizes people, and it spreads this kind of feel and energy throughout the company. And they redesigned and launched their new orientation and onboarding process and a lot of other activities. But I think the key thing was that in order to make this happen, they had to engage everyone, literally everyone in the organization, in having experiences around it. And those needed to be pretty carefully designed, but there were some that worked better than others, and they tweaked and improved as they went along. So that's been a big success. They have moved up on their engagement scores pretty significantly, and turnover and other measures are much improved. One more example I'll share quickly, and then we'll open up to some questions and discussion. But we work with a large telecommunications company, Saudi Telecom in Saudi Arabia. And a few years ago, they had a very strong and charismatic CEO, Dr. Khalid Biari, and he knew that he needed to effect a huge culture change in the organization. It was very much a governmental type organization. In fact, it was part of the government. It was big, it was pedantic, it was bureaucratic, and he knew that it needed to become collaborative, become a learning organization, and have mad digital skills, if you will. So here are some of the things they did. He appointed a head of culture, and the head of culture reported directly to him, a gentleman called Muhammad Al-Qabti. They developed core values, but they got lots of input from people in the company. And the two of the core values that they had, one was employee first and one was customer first. They started with customer first, and then they added employee first. And of course, people would say, well, how can you have both? And they maintained that you can have both. They're both first in our mind, and you can't actually have one without the other. And that became kind of a belief that perpetuated throughout the organization. They crafted 4 waves of rollout that included thousands of conversations. Managers had to go out and have conversations with people on the front lines. And this management by walking around, a term we're all familiar with, is a form of experiential learning. Managers getting out there and experiencing through observation and conversation what's really going on. They had 2 key components for measurement: the organizational health initiative that comes, I think, from McKinsey, and then their HYPO program. So they had this organizational health initiative and then their HYPO program. The HYPO program is the one they did with us, and they continue to do. So we work with 3 levels in the organization: Aspire, Inspire, and Transform. And we engage them in a 3-year learning journey that has a number of components, many of which are experiential. They have built a corporate academy, and they use that corporate academy. The picture on the slide is of a session there, not just to go off and learn. I talked to Dr. Rafat Malik, who's the head of that academy, and he's also a company EVP, and he said, I said, what's different now that you have this corporate academy and this culture that's built around it? And he said, people used to go to training, right? And then they came back, but they couldn't change the context. And so when they went back, they invariably fell back into their old habits and old ways of doing things. He said, we decided we had to change the context. And so they've used this corporate academy to change the context. They put people in cohorts to work on things, and they give them relief from their current job responsibilities, and they bring them into the academy. They give them very realistic scenarios and immerse them in these scenarios. They created a real laboratory environment where people can do the kinds of things Alan mentioned in the beginning, make the risk a little bit lower, make it a safe environment, but engage people in these kinds of experiential learning activities in a laboratory way where they're doing innovation and they're working on things like artificial intelligence and data visualization and some pretty heady concepts. And so all of this is, of course, really expensive, and it begs the question of, is it worthwhile? And so I asked Dr. Malik, well, what would you say about, is it worthwhile, and what evidence do you have that it is? I know he thinks it is. And he said, well, our organizational health, on the organizational health index, we improved from 30, which was in the lowest third globally, to 80, which is in the top quartile. So that's one data point. A second one is their brand value went from 2.8 billion to 6.2 billion, and their market cap doubled even while their competitive set average market cap dropped by 50%. And I will tell you, having worked with that organization for 6 years, that the feel of the place, the vibe of the place is just incredibly different today than it was 6 years ago, and that is a very significant positive difference. So if we think about all of this, it also starts making you think about, well, what's next? What's on the horizon when it comes to experiential learning? And as I've had conversations with our clients and other people who do the kind of work that we do here, some of the things that come up are, these are already sort of underway, but organizational learning that is truly embedded in the day-to-day work that people do. It's going to be assisted by artificial intelligence in a number of ways. It's going to be even more just in time than it already is. It will be more and more employee-led and more personalized to exactly what an individual needs. It'll be enhanced by augmented reality and virtual reality, and it'll be multimodal. I'm curious to know what else you're thinking about as you think about what's next for learning in organizations. Are there other thoughts that come to mind besides the list that's here? We'd like to have you type those in. Alan can explain how to do that, I think.
Yep. So thank you for teeing that up, Melanie. Folks, get out your typing fingers, put them on your keyboard, go to the question box, and answer the question, what else? So if you think about what's next in the future of e-learning, just put whatever comes to your mind. What do you think the future is? It could be one of these things on the screen. Type it in. If you think it's something else, tell us what you think it is. But type your thoughts into the question box. It's not just as a question. We're just trying to get some thinking on what's next in experiential learning, what's next in organizational learning. Do you think it'll be more personalized? Do you think it'll be about a self-directed career? Do you see a future of AR, VR?
Yeah, anything you're thinking of is interesting, I think. Anything you're thinking about in terms of the future of learning. And Alan, why don't you pop that? Can you pop the next
Yep.
square up there too? Because you can also address this question as you type in, why is it important to continue this experiential learning journey and figure out how to do it better and better? Some of the reasons are, for example, that it just seems as though the world and our organizations are getting more and more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That's just not getting less, and we need to figure out ways to simplify so that we can learn and improve. Another reason is that learning really has to be a lifelong endeavor if organizations are to succeed. Not a brand new idea, but it seems to be becoming a more and more important idea. Most business schools now have a lifelong learning initiative that they didn't have a few years ago. People are also saying, for example, that in the future on your resume and when employers look at you, your credentials from school, et cetera, are going to be important, but they're going to be less important relative to your skill bank and the set of experiences that you can tout. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about, and we're curious to know, in either of these areas and in the area of organizational learning in general, what are your thoughts? What do you think is going to be more important in the future?
Yeah, so back to your question box, just put an answer, put a thought in there, whether it's about what do you think's the future, what's next for organizational learning, or where do you think the world's headed in terms of organizations change, skill gaps, volatility, uncertainty. So let's explore a couple. Keep typing into the boxes, folks. So we have a bunch of stuff coming in, which is wonderful. And I'll read some off, Melanie, and maybe you can comment. Let's just hear what you think. So, like partnerships across the ecosystem. In terms of organizational learning.
Yeah, and there was a news item recently that INSEAD is partnering with Singularity out on the West Coast. We are partnering with a Chinese university. We're also partnering, though, with consulting firms and other players. So I think that's absolutely right, and we're seeing a lot of that. We even partner with some of our corporate clients to offer programs to their clients or even to their marketplace in particular parts of the world. So I think that's absolutely right. Our associate dean, MS Krishnan here, wrote a book years ago that the publisher asked him to update and reissue. And the essential point, if I can totally simplify it, was we're entering a world of N equals 1 and R equals G. And all that means is that it's personalization to an N of 1, everything we do, and it takes a set of global resources, R equals G, a set of global resources or partnerships to do it. So I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, that's great. Some of the partnering that's happening, you start to see these networks that are coming together to deliver value. So another one here, micro learning and moments that matter, shift from career development to the path to mastery.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one form you see that in now is, I think most of us, we need to know something, whether it's how to fix our washing machine or, how to cook some particular kind of sauce. You go to YouTube and you find it. And I think we're just going to get better and better at creating micro learning that people can access just when they need it. And it's really powerful and good. It's probably more than a video that you watch at some point.
Yep. Here's continuous learning, technology enhanced AI for insights, AR, VR. Good example.
I mean, can you imagine entering a learning world on your laptop and being able to put in what challenges you're facing, and then to have lots of possibilities come up, some that you can consume right there online, some that are reading, some that might be interactive, some that you might have to pursue in other ways. But I think AI-assisted learning is likely to become more important as we go forward.
Yep, here's one that you and I actually talked about this earlier this morning. Learning progress assessed and included in performance reviews. So sort of a tightening of this with performance review, performance feedback, and how that's radically changing.
Yes, absolutely. I think so many companies, including us here at Ross, and our own performance management process has changed to what we call mindful performance. And instead of an annual performance review, we have to have several conversations each year on an ongoing basis. And they even have a name: plan, do, review, and you. And so by the end of a cycle, you are expected to have had conversations around planning, reviewing, doing, and the individual's aspirations in their work as part of, and you're evaluating. I'm evaluated on whether I had those conversations with my team members or not, as is every manager in the organization. Another thing that DTE Energy did, and I know many companies are doing this as well, is they're making managers responsible for, and not just the manager, but the manager and the employee that reports to the manager, responsible for ensuring the person has had development opportunities and the right kind of development opportunities during the period.
Right. All right. I'm going to hit you with 5 more. This is our last. We have 3 minutes, so we're going to close on this, and I want to get to your 30-second video because I think it plays right into everything we're doing. But Sanjay, thank you for your speed typing. You ready, Melanie? So I want you to just think about this from Sanjay. Validated capability, digital badges and credentials, best of breed learning technology ecosystems, global impact, participant, learner first, experience economy, and customer obsession. Whew. So those are his what's next.
Yeah, that's a lot. And, just going back to the very first one about credentials, I'm on a next generation credentialing committee here at Ross. I talked to my colleague at Stanford. They have a similar committee. I think most schools are thinking about what does the next generation of credentials look like? And there's a lot of talk about, stacking credentials and what that means and so on. So it's a big unknown world out there, right? But we're all discussing and experimenting and trying new things to figure out what it's going to look like and what it should look like in the future.
Yep. Okay. So let's see if we can play this.
Yeah, just in the spirit of what's next. One of the things we've done at Ross, we just launched. We're the first top tier school to launch an online MBA. It's not 100% online, but mostly online. And but online doesn't mean that you're sitting at your laptop doing work all by yourself. Obviously, there are synchronous kinds of things that happen from your laptop. But one of the most exciting ones is done through what we call our Whitelight Studio. It looks like even though we tested this earlier and made it play, it looks like it might not play now. Oh, there we go.
I'm gonna improvise and see what happens here.
There we go. So the only audio on this is a little bit of music, and for some reason it's not playing, but more importantly is just to illustrate, this is a studio where a faculty member can be teaching and facilitating. There can be up to 1,000 students, if you will, but we have groups more of a size of, 50 or 60. And the faculty member, she or he can see 60 people on the screen at a time. They can interact live with any individual. The faculty member can break them up into groups and have them work on something and then come back together. So it's a Whitelight Studio using some advanced Zoom and other connectivity technology that really, as close as possible to a face-to-face classroom, it creates that environment, and it's been very successful.
Yep. All right, perfect. Thank you all. Thank you, Melanie, so much. I wanted to just close with the upcoming programs that we're running together with the Michigan Ross CorpU partnership. So these would be online programs. These are opportunities for you to experience what CorpU online programs feel like, what we call next generation executive education. So the online experiential in an online format, problem-based, integrated with work. You work 30 minutes a day, Monday through Thursday typically, and then day 5 is a 1-hour live event. So you can see positive leadership with Kim Cameron, understanding talent management with Dave Ulrich, and then driving your teams to high performance with Dave Ulrich in March. So those are examples for people that wish to try. Thank you all for your active engagement. This was a great group today. Melanie, thanks so much for your talk and keeping our audience engaged. Thanks, everybody. Have a great holiday season. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.